Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today we have one more set of great revenge stories. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Apprentice engineer pisses off the crew, gets left behind 250 miles from home. Some years ago, I got a gig working a weekend music festival. Fairly simple, too. 10 bands per day and all pretty standard rock and roll fare. Boss man puts 4 of us out on the gig, me, Dreadful Boris, Big Chris, and Hammer. He also said we'd be taking out an apprentice, a young lad who was the son of a local promoter. Well, always nice to have an extra pair of hands, and it's good to help train the next generation. After all, that's how we learned in the past. As it turned out, this lad was about as much use as an aqualung to a trout. He had an entitled attitude the size of a mid-ranged African country. He was a really good sound engineer already, and that he could probably show us a few tricks. Oh, really? We get to the venue and get busy unloading the truck. We've got a 16-tonner stuffed to the gills with 2 sound desks and about 16 kilowatts of sound gear for front of the house and about 6 kilowatts of monitors. As you might imagine, this is pretty heavy stuff, and it takes all of us to safely unload it and get it stacked up in place. Except that after unloading the first amp rack, all on wheels, but still around 80 kilos, the entitled brat snottily announces that I'm a sound engineer, not a humper, and promptly strolls off. Okay. Well, we didn't really need him gumming up the works. We're all well used to slinging boxes around, so about an hour later, we've got the rig stacked up and strapped down, run out to the multi-core to the FOH desk, and are ready to start cabling up and tying power into the on-site generator. Out of nowhere, the spotty oik emerges from whatever hole he'd buried himself in and asks what he can do. I say, I'm going to plug up front-of-house speakers. Perhaps you could help Hammer cable up the speakers. Yeah, I don't take orders from girlies. Quick side note here, Hammer was 5'9", drop-dead gorgeous, and hard as nails, hence her nickname. She was also a damn fine FOH engineer and a bloody good mate. Boris, Chris, and I collectively groaned inwardly and winced in anticipation of a full 16-inch broadside from Hammer. Seriously, folks, do not F with her unless you want the family jewels dangling from the nearest tree. Instead, she smiles sweetly, never a good sign, and says, well, I'm sure you'll learn something useful. I then go off to play with the cables FOH while Boris and Chris busy themselves with the monitors. A while later, I'm back on stage, Spotty Oik has wandered off again. Hammer has this resigned look on her face. What happened, I ask. Turns out that, despite cables and connector ports being well labeled, the Oik had managed to make a complete pig's ear of plugging up the amp racks. Trust me, it's very hard to make this kind of mistake. I found the Oik some moments later and told him that it was not the proper way of doing things, and that if he wasn't sure what to do, he should always ask one of us beforehand. What then came out of his mouth absolutely floored me. I don't need to know all that crap. I'm a sound engineer. What? Hammer, who was standing a few feet away, snorted derisively and rolled her eyes heavenwards. It took me a few seconds to process this particular nugget of stupid. Well, you have to know how all this works. It's part and parcel of the job. As you're here to learn, I suggest you pay attention. Well, you're just a bunch of roadies. What do you know? Upon delivering this charming bon mot, he ambles off, again, leaving me to retrieve my jaw from the deck and Hammer barely able to restrain a fit of laughter that would have incapacitated a rhino. At a guess, this idiot thought he was going to be white-gloving front of house for the whole gig. An hour or so later, we're all set up. Now we have a fair idea of the acts and how they're going to be performing. In situations like this, you rarely get the opportunity of a full-blown sound check, so you have to rely on experience to set the desk up from the cold. Luckily, we got the first act on stage a half hour before the kickoff, so I could quickly get a rough sense of the overall setup. A bit of exposition. It's convenient to reuse channels across acts, so I generally keep the first 20 or so channels for drums, bass, and guitars, and the last half dozen or so channels for vocals. If a band comes in with anything else, percussion, brass, Tibetan nose flutes, etc., we whack them on channels in the middle. Keeps things nice and simple and consistent across the board, and becomes important in a moment. The working procedure in show is also simple. Dreadful Boris and Big Chris run the monitor desk, and Hammer and I run front of house. We'll do 2 acts each before handing over to the other. Saves wear and tear on the ears. And when we're not running the desk, we'll handle setting up the stage for each act and troubleshooting when necessary, as well as doing runs for food and coffee in between. We also tasked the spotty oik with help with the stage setups, which rapidly proved problematic. We finished the first act and aimed to do the turnover within 15 minutes. Generally, the incoming act will tell us their mic requirements, and we'll write up a mic plot, which then gets sent up to the front of house desk. Up comes Spotty Oik with the mic plot, and he goes back to help with stage setup. As I'm checking each mic, I notice that I cannot hear the vocal channels. No sooner had I spotted this than Dreadful Boris comes on the intercom and asks if I can hear the vocal channels. He can't hear them either. He then goes off to check the stage box where the mics are plugged in. From all the way out front, I hear him shout, "F me!" Seconds later, he's back on the cans. Do you know what that effing idiot has done? Only repatched all the vocal channels so that all the plugs on the stage box are lined up neatly one after the other. His words. Ye gods. Boris is rapidly repatching the mics, and we're good to go again. A few hours later, I'm starting my second shift out front. I won't bore you with my experiences of riding herd on Spotty Oik on stage shift, which, shall we say, was interesting. Currently on stage is a rather nice jazz septet. I love doing jazz. Give me a nice 20-piece big band and I'm a happy bunny. Up strolls he who shall not be mentioned and asks, "When can I have a go at mixing? I'm really good, you know." Seeing as how he's here to learn, I tell him he can take the next act under my supervision. This happened to be an acoustic duo, 2 guitars and 2 vocals. Even the most tyro engineer should be able to handle something so simple, right? Wrong. I've already set what I regarded as a sensible baseline on the faders for him to work with. First thing he does is reach for the master faders and cranks in another 15 decibels. No! Immediately, the rig teeters on the edge of feedback, and I rapidly pull the mains back. Look and listen. Balance out the 2 vocals, then the guitars. Leave the mains alone. He then starts making wildly inappropriate changes to the channel's EQ. Again, the rig starts to squeak. Okay, enough. I shove him out of the way and bring it back under control. I won't fatigue you further with the endless catalog of foul-ups and attitude that he managed to effect over the rest of the weekend. Suffice to say that despite the best efforts of myself and Hammer to try and teach this guy, they all went for naught. Couple this with the constant drip, drip, drip of snide commentary about he was really a better engineer than the rest of us, and by the end of the weekend, we're all pretty pissed off. Come the end of the event, and now comes the fun part of striking the rig and loading out. I'm being sarcastic about the fun part, by the way. 2 solid days, and we're all knackered, and the last thing we want to be doing is the get out. But of course, it has to be done. It's always an all-hands-on-deck situation, except the Spotty Oik has once again vanished into the woodwork. 2 back-breaking hours later, and we're all done. Truck's loaded to go home. So where's Spotty Oik? Nowhere. We give it a good 15 minutes, but no joy. We then decide to go look for him, so we spend another 20 minutes trolling around the site trying to find him. Again, he's done a disappearing act. We get back to the truck. It's now close to 3 a.m., and almost simultaneously we say F him. We climb back on board and drive the 250 miles back to the warehouse to unload. Next afternoon, Boss Man calls me to find out why we left Spotty Oik behind. I gave him the cliff notes and was then told that the Oik had to call his dad at 3 in the morning to come and get him, a 500-mile round trip. He then said, "I never liked that promoter anyway. He was always late paying the bill on previous gigs. Next time he calls wanting a rig and crew, I think I'll tell him to F off." And our next story. I found the guy who scammed me out of $200. Some background. I'm an avid Transformers fan and still collect figures to this day. A few years ago, I was looking for a BotCon exclusive Shattered Glass Rodimus. Prices on eBay were damn high, so I turned to the Junkie on Exchange, TFW2005.com. I bought and sold items there several times and have gotten great deals. I put out a post of what I was looking to buy and waited. Next day, I got a message from a user I'll refer to as Craplord, or SL for short. SL said he had a Shattered Glass Rodimus and said he would sell it for $200. That was at least half of what they went for on eBay at the time, so I accepted and sent the money via PayPal as a gift. Some of the balance was paid via my PayPal balance, and the majority was on my credit card. $50 from PayPal and $150 from the credit card. This detail is important later. In short, SL lied. He never had the figure I wanted and scammed me out of $200. I went to the TFW 2005 forums and called this guy out and asked for help from the mods over there. After doing so, I called PayPal. Sadly, since the payment was sent as a gift, there was nothing they could do to refund me. However, the rep told me since about $150 of it was paid from my credit card, I can file a claim with them. He told me what department to call, who to talk to, and what sort of claim to file. Awesome. He also put a note on Craplord's account to be investigated. After calling my credit card company, someone on TFW 2005 emailed me saying they knew this seller in real life and gave me his contact details. Normally, I don't support doxing someone, but he's a thief. F him. I called SL and left a voicemail and text. He later called me and tried to play dumb. Then he said his TFW 2005 account and his PayPal were hacked. Really? What a coincidence. I told him he should refund my money or I would call the local police and have them sort this out. He caved after that and gave me a sob story how he needed the money to buy his daughter a Christmas gift. I didn't buy the story and threatened legal action. He had to have his girlfriend send the money back through her PayPal account since his ended up getting locked due to all this nonsense. So I got my PayPal balance of $50 from him and my bank credited me $150, so I got my $200 back. Here's the kicker. I never told him I filed a claim against him with my credit card company. Keep in mind he only sent me back $50 for PayPal. My credit card company refunded me the $150, $200 total, so that meant that they had his info too, and they would come after him to recoup their costs. A week later, my bank called me and told me this seller was claiming I breached PayPal's terms of service and blah blah blah. I called the guy again and told him if he lied again, I'd call the cops. An hour later, my bank said everything was resolved and to have a nice day. Edit. I had him personally refund my PayPal balance of $50 since there was nothing I could do about that via PayPal. My bank credited me the $150 and I assume went after him for the $150. I got my original $200 back, nothing more. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.